This anime begins by showing medieval Japan, where a legendary samurai named Miyamoto Musashi arrives at a temple to borrow an item. The monk named Unso, who is the temple's leader, then gives Musashi a condition to defeat the old monk's disciple if the samurai wants to obtain the item. Without hesitation, Musashi fights against all of Unso's disciples, one by one until he manages to defeat them all. After witnessing Musashi winning the fight, Unso along with a young monk, Kaizen, invite Musashi to go to a storage room for the item he desires. At that moment, Unso is seen praying for the item until the candles around him extinguish before he finally takes the storage box of the item and gives it to Musashi. After that, Unso reminds Musashi to return the item within 33 days and orders Kaizen to accompany Musashi on his journey. Before Musashi leaves, Unso briefly asks him about the purpose of borrowing the item, and Musashi only replies that he will use it to defeat demons. As Musashi and Kaizen leave the temple, they meet a fellow samurai who will accompany Musashi on his journey named Matsui Kensuke, who is the master of 4 other samurais, Gensai, Sahei, Goromaru, and Heikuro, who seem annoyed because a monk will join the journey. During the journey while Sahei is resting, he explains to Kaizen that their journey's destination is a village in the mountains where their clan lives, which 6 months ago was in chaos due to fighting among farmers. Because of the high number of casualties, the local lord sent a spy samurai named Iyamon to monitor the situation. Unfortunately, Iyamon betrayed by persuading the villagers to join his group, and he even tortured other spy samurais sent by the local lord and sent them back severely wounded. This eventually angered the local lord, but since he couldn't directly attack the village, the local lord asked Musashi and the strongest samurais to help defeat Iyamon. According to Sahei, Iyamon was also a disciple trained by Kensuke, as well as a sworn brother samurai like Sahei and the others. That's why Sahei asks Kaizen to stay protected behind the samurais. Additionally, he also asks about the contents of the box Kaizen carries, but he admits not knowing what is inside it because the item has been sealed since before he was born. Kaizen only knows the story from Unso that the item was once used to fight demons. Meanwhile, Gensei is alone and sad because Iyamon, who is his sworn brother, will be killed in the mission, even though Iyamon is one of the samurais Gensei admires for his exceptional sword skills. After continuing their journey for some time, Musashi and the others rested by the riverbank, where Musashi asked Kensuke about Iyamon, whom Kensuke had trained since he was 10 years old. At that moment, Kensuke admitted that Iyamon was a naturally talented samurai, who never had the chance to become a famous samurai, especially since Iyamon came from a poor family. That evening, Kensuke warned his disciples to stay focused on their mission to confront Iyamon, even though he was their sworn comrade. If they felt pity for Iyamon, they would be the ones to be eliminated by him. After that, Musashi mentioned that he knew there were 3 evil samurais among their group. Upon hearing Musashi's statement, Goromaru seemed offended because he and the others had been friends for a long time, so it was impossible if there was an evil samurai in their group. In response to Goromaru's words, Musashi suddenly asked Kensuke to show his arm, revealing a tattoo symbol of an eye similar to the tattoo on the face of the spies who were previously sent back by Iyamon. Unexpectedly, Kensuke did not deny Musashi's accusation, leaving his disciples shocked. Kensuke then admitted to being fascinated by the dream world created by Iyamon, which was much better than the current world order. With his identity exposed, Kensuke challenged Musashi to a duel, and without hesitation, Musashi accepted the challenge until he managed to defeat Kensuke with several slashes of his katana. Not long after, it was revealed that Gensai had been possessed by Genmo, or the demon power of Iyamon, showing his true form with his long tongue. At that moment, Sahei and the others were surprised to find out that Gensai and Kensuke were traitors within the group. Gensai then praised Musashi for realizing the presence of traitors after the legendary samurai had realized that the spies previously sent back by Iyamon were still alive, then incited Kensuke and Gensai to join Iyamon's group. Shortly after, Gensai then began to attack Musashi using his long tongue to avenge Kensuke's death, who was killed by Musashi. The relentless attacks overwhelmed Musashi, but fortunately, Kaizen quickly retrieved the Oni gauntlet, or the demon-powered object from the box he carried and threw it to Musashi. Quickly, Musashi put on the legendary gauntlet known to seal demon powers and make the wearer stronger. With the help of the gauntlet's power, Musashi finally managed to kill Gensei and immediately removed the gauntlet because his power could influence the wearer. Shortly after, Musashi told Kazan and the remaining samurais that they would encounter the Genma monsters on their next journey, so he asked them to decide whether to continue with their group or not. The next morning, Musashi noticed that no one chose to leave, which prompted the samurai to warn that no one would be free during the journey. At that moment, Sahe was still curious about the third traitor in their group, but Musashi said the third traitor might not necessarily be evil, especially since the traitor was only observing without intending to disrupt their journey. Switching to Musashi's subconscious, where the samurai appeared surrounded by light, claiming to be an Oni demon, revealing that Musashi would not be able to fight the Genma with his samurai abilities. Nevertheless, the Oni admitted to assisting Musashi because in the past, the Oni were eradicated by the Genma demons. The Oni then asked Musashi to kill all the Genma and imprison their souls in the legendary gauntlet. Back to the real world, Musashi and the others were seen continuing their journey by crossing a bridge on a cliff. Unexpectedly, Musashi had a fear of heights that caused the samurai to be frightened, and almost left behind his companions. Shortly after, Musashi's group arrived at a deserted village, where Heikuro, using his sense of smell, could not detect the smell of a fireplace or cooking stove being used. After that, they concluded that the village had been abandoned by its inhabitants for quite some time. Musashi then ordered all his companions to inspect every house to ensure the presence of any remaining villagers in the village. After searching the area, they found no one, so there was a possibility that Iyamon had taken the villagers with him. Musashi then divided the group into two to search for clues again, and when Musashi and Kazan entered a house, they saw mining equipment indicating the possibility of a mining site near the village where the villagers were hiding. Meanwhile, the three samurais were still discussing Kensuke and Gensei, who chose to betray and side with Iyamon. While inspecting the house, they found a barrel containing gunpowder, which further strengthened Musashi's suspicion that there was a mining location near the village where the villagers were hiding. As they were still discussing the estimated mining location, they were startled by the appearance of a little girl who ran away in fear after seeing them. Without hesitation, they'd all chased after the girl to question her. After checking several houses, Goromaru actually found two corpses inside a villager's house, so Kazan immediately went in to pray for the two bodies. At the same time, the little girl was hiding in the basement of the house and Kazan calmly asked her to join in praying for the two bodies, which, according to the girl named Sayo, were her grandparents. With Kazan's help, Sayo finally agreed to meet Musashi and the others who gave her food. At that moment, she confessed that she had run away from them before due to trauma from the samurais who had once killed the villagers in her village. Musashi then asked who had killed Sayo's grandparents and promised to avenge the samurai who had killed her family if she showed the whereabouts of the killer samurai. At the same time, the wind began to blow and suddenly the villagers who had died became an undead that emerged from the forest. Musashi then asked Kazan, one of the samurais, to protect Sayo, while the others would face the undead with him. Goromaru, who joined the fight, immediately used his ability as an eagle tamer by summoning his two beloved eagles, Toromaru and Jiromaru. With the help of these two eagles, Goromaru and the others found it easier to eliminate some of the undead. This also impressed Musashi enough with Goromaru's abilities. Shortly after, Musashi put on the Oni gauntlet to destroy some of the incoming undead, and he began to think of a way to defeat the undead in a trap. Not long after, Musashi intended to blow up all the undead, so he immediately carried Sayo to her house to lure the undead into the house. After successfully luring the undead, Sayo was brought out of the house followed by Musashi, who came out before Kazan and the others threw a barrel of gunpowder and fire, resulting in a massive explosion that destroyed all the undead. After the successful plan, Musashi accidentally stumbled upon a chunk of gold ore, which he suspected to be the main reason for the chaos in the village. Sayo confirmed this by telling him that initially the villagers were mining copper and tin, but after the discovery of gold mining behind the mountain, all the villagers switched to gold mining, leading to chaos that prompted the Lord to send Iyamon to investigate the gold mine-related chaos in the village before it was discovered by the government authorities. Unfortunately, Iyamon chose to betray because he was blinded by the profit from the gold mine, even taking the villagers to be used as gold mine workers, which now serves as Iyamon's headquarters. Sayo also admitted that Iyamon had indeed turned into a monster after learning about the gold mine. It's no wonder that Iyamon wanted to turn the villagers into monsters and his slaves. According to Sayo, Iyamon had also turned her parents into monsters. Luckily, she survived after being protected by her grandparents before they both died. With the information presented by Sayo, Musashi decided that they should return home because if they lost in the fight, Iyamon would surely eliminate them. Musashi also suggested that they report the incident to the shogunate so that the government could immediately deploy a large force to attack Iyamon's fortress. Shortly after, all of them, including Sayo, embarked on the journey back until they were surprised by a broken bridge connecting the village. During the confusion, Sayo demanded Musashi's promise to kill Iyamon to avenge her. Sayo expressed her disappointment with Musashi's decision to go back on his promise to eliminate Iyamon, who had killed her grandparents and caused suffering to the villagers. She even stated that she would kill Iyamon without Musashi's help. At that moment, Musashi remained silent and decided to camp around the cliffs because they didn't know any other way back. Meanwhile, 3 mysterious individuals were seen not hesitating to kill anyone they encountered to carry out their mission from Iyamon to stop Musashi's movements. The next day, Musashi and the others finally decided to continue their journey towards the mine with the help of Sayo as their guide. When everyone was exhausted from the quite difficult mountain terrain, Sayo secretly caught a rabbit for their lunch and vegetables for Kaizen, who did not eat meat. At that moment, Musashi and the others thanked Sayo for helping them prepare the food. After that, Kaizen took the opportunity to skin the rabbit, which had become their travel meal. After eating, they resumed their journey to find a river because their water supply had run out. Upon reaching the river area, Musashi and the others drank while washing their faces, while Sayo began to feel that the forest she passed through looked different. When the wind started blowing stronger, indicating that the Genma would appear, they all immediately stood guard. Musashi then ordered Heikuro to protect Sayo, while he and the others would confront the approaching Genma. With excellent teamwork, Musashi's group managed to defeat the Genma, and Goromaru now became even more determined to defeat Iyamon, although he had initially hesitated to do so because Iyamon was his sworn samurai brother. In the midst of the discussion, suddenly an arrow shot out, hitting Jiromaru and Goromaru's body. Everyone was shocked, especially when the attack ultimately killed the eagle and Goromaru. In his final moments, Goromaru asked Musashi and the others to take care of Tarumaru, his surviving eagle. At the same time, Sayo was abducted by a mysterious figure who took her to the forest. Quickly, Musashi chased after them, demanding that the figure reveal themselves and return Sayo. At that moment, the mysterious figure asked Musashi's group to come to a temple at the river's head the next morning if Musashi wanted to save Sayo. After that, Musashi returned to his group, who were still grieving over the death of Goromaru, while Musashi felt curious about the figure who had abducted Sayo because he was familiar with the voice of the kidnappers. On the other hand, Kaizen suggested that they should remain focused on finding Iyamon, rather than rescuing Sayo, which he deemed too risky. Heikuro, upon hearing this, appeared angry and intended to confront Kaizen while questioning the humane side of the monk. Kaizen predicted that Sayo would eventually be released even if they didn't rescue her, as she was useless to the kidnappers, so he believed their group should better focus on the mission of defeating Iyamon. However, Heikuro reminded Kaizen that they must avenge Goromaru's death, who was killed by Sayo's kidnappers. Musashi then stopped the argument and questioned Kaizen whether Buddha taught humans to leave others in distress. Kaizen remained silent, while Musashi appeared to walk out of the cave to train his sword skills by practicing in the rain. Meanwhile, Sayo, awakening from her unconscious, and saw 3 figures who had abducted her. While asked if they knew Musashi, the 3 kidnappers confirmed it, and one of them even demanded revenge against Musashi by killing him. When the kidnappers asked about Sayo's relationship with Musashi's group, she claimed to be the leader of the group. The next morning, Musashi and the others arrived at the mentioned temple, where 3 mysterious samurai were waiting for them. However, as the 3 kidnappers refused to release Sayo, Musashi prepared with the Oni gauntlet to fight the 3 mysterious samurai in front of him. After removing their head coverings, the 3 kidnappers admitted to being Genma disguised as humans, and Musashi appeared surprised to see that the 3 samurai he was about to fight were the Yoshioka brothers from Kyoto, whom he had killed 20 years ago. After that, the Yoshioka brothers stated that they had returned from the afterlife to seek revenge on Musashi for killing them and causing the Yoshioka family name to fade. Musashi seemed indifferent to all the words of the Yoshioka brothers, who then transformed into Genma monsters before the battle with Musashi began. At the same time, One of the Yoshioka brothers set fire to the giant temple bell used to imprison Sayo, prompting Musashi to ask Kazan and the others to rescue Sayo. The three of them were puzzled about how to lift the giant bell. Meanwhile, Musashi was being overwhelmed by the three powerful Yoshioka brothers. Returning to Kazan and his companions, they tried to find a water source to extinguish the bell's fire. Unfortunately, the well in the temple had dried up, leading them to try toppling the bell with a wooden pole to create a gap to jack it up. On the other hand, Musashi continued to fight the Yoshioka brothers until he was overwhelmed. On the other hand, Kazan was nearly desperate, but he suddenly heard Sayo's prayers from behind the bell, which initially he had ignored, but he was touched by the girl's determination, leading him to resolve to rescue her. Kazan then prayed to Buddha and bravely pushed the bell, even though the fire burned his skin, hoping to free Sayo as soon as possible. Seeing this, Sahe and Goromaru also joined in to help. With the strength of Kazan's prayers, he and the others finally managed to topple the bell and rescue Sayo, although Kazan suffered severe burns. On the other hand, Musashi, who was beginning to be controlled by the Oni, seemed to successfully defeat the Yoshioka brothers, whose souls then entered the Oni gauntlet. Kazan then used the last of his strength to approach Musashi and reminded him not to lose himself as a human. After hearing Kazan's words, Musashi began to regain his consciousness and immediately removed the Oni gauntlet he was wearing. Shortly after, due to his severe burns, Kazan was taken into the temple where he delivered his final message, asking Sahe and Heikuro to accompany Musashi on his journey, which he believed would be enjoyable. Seeing Sayo crying, Kazan tried to comfort her by giving her his prayer beads and praising Sayo's cooking, which he found tastier than the temple's food. After Kazan's death, Musashi then spoke with Sayo and asked her not to join the next journey, which would be even more dangerous. However, she insisted on joining because she wanted to complete her mission to avenge herself against Iamon, so Musashi had no reason to refuse, especially since he had to complete his mission quickly and return the Oni gauntlet to the monk Unso. On the other hand, inside the fortress at the gold mining site, Iamon had learned that the Yoshioka brothers had been defeated by Musashi, so he prepared other samurai to confront the legendary samurai. Returning to Musashi's and the others' journey, which had to be halted by three female samurai. At that moment, Musashi appeared to ask the three women to give way to their group, but the three women, who claimed to be the Yoshioka sisters, intended to avenge the death of the Yoshioka brothers at the hands of Musashi. One of the Yoshioka sisters seemed to target the box containing the Oni gauntlet held by Sayo, but Sayo tried to defend the box even though she was thrown back. Just as Sayo managed to open the box and Musashi was about to use the Oni gauntlet, the Yoshioka sisters suddenly disappeared. Musashi and the others then resumed their journey until they stopped at an empty hut after Sayo fell ill with a high fever from the exhaustion of the long journey. At that moment, Sahe intended to search for herbal plants to treat Sayo, so he asked Heikuro to compress her and requested Musashi to stay alert as the Yoshioka sisters could attack again. After Sahe left, Musashi was seen practicing swordsmanship beside the hut while questioning Iamon's motives for controlling the gold mine. The scene then shows more than a dozen years ago, where a boy witnesses his house, which a place of poor prostitution, burned to the ground by fire. After the fire is out, he found a katana amidst the rubble. At that time, Kensuke reprimanded the boy who found the katana, causing the boy to run away in fear. Unfortunately, the boy stumbled and fainted, so Kensuke took the boy to his residence. Shortly after, when the boy regained consciousness, Kensuke told him that he knew the boy came from the red light district, and asked why the boy seemed pleased to find the katana amidst the ruins. At that moment, the boy admitted that he just wanted to return the katana to its samurai owner, but Kensuke knew that the boy was lying to him, because the original owner of the katana the boy found was Kensuke's student named Iamon, who had been found dead before the fire occurred. After Kensuke learned that the boy wanted to become a samurai, Kensuke then taught the boy some basic sword techniques, after seeing the boy had the potential to become a samurai. Back to the present, Sasaki Kojiro, a famous samurai and Musashi's enemy, had joined Iamon and intended to kill Musashi as soon as possible. At that moment, Kojiro also threatened to kill Iamon if Musashi did not come to the fortress as Iamon said. Iamon then asked Kojiro to relax more because he was confident that Musashi would come. Although Iamon did not inform Kojiro of his reason for summoning Musashi, He revealed that he only wanted to create a better world, using the power of the Genma and gold that he had acquired with his sworn friends, who would come with Musashi later. Returning to the hut, Heikuro, who did not possess high sword skills like his companions, began to feel useless because he couldn't protect anyone on the mission. He began to blame himself and wondered why it wasn't him who died so that his fellow companions wouldn't feel burdened by him. After feeling worthless, Heikuro quietly ran into the forest, leaving Sahyo behind, who finally woke up after experiencing a nightmare in her sleep. In the forest, Heikuro continued walking away from the hut, questioning why Iyamon and Kensuke betrayed them and why Kensuke asked him, who had relatively low samurai abilities, to join the mission to find Iyamon. At that moment, Heikuro admitted that he wanted to live in peace like before when he and the others trained swordsmanship together. During his despair, Heikuro suddenly saw Sahe, who had obtained the herbs, accompanied by the figures of Goromaru and Kaizen, whispering that he still believed in Heikuro to fulfill the given mission. From that whisper, Heikuro regained his confidence and abandoned his intention to flee from the mission given by Kensuke. Meanwhile, Sahyo, who came out of the hut, saw Musashi still practicing swordsmanship, so she asked why the samurai kept training, even though he was known as a powerful legendary samurai. Hearing this, Musashi admitted that he was still too weak, especially since he still relied on the Aoni gauntlet to confront the Genma. Therefore, he always tried to hone his skills so that he could become a truly strong samurai, without the aid of demonic power. Musashi then asked Sahyo not to continue the journey to find Iyamon, because the journey would become increasingly dangerous, but she insisted on continuing with the group. During her confession, Sahyo said she was the cause of the war that occurred because she was the first person to find the gold nugget from the headwaters of the river, while playing on the mountain with her friends. Delighted with her discovery, Sahyo brought the gold nugget back to the village, and since that day, all the villagers became obsessed with obtaining more gold, especially the samurai and Iyamon, who were tasked with overseeing the village when chaos occurred due to the gold dispute among the villagers. Iyamon even brought Sahyo's parents, killing her grandfather and grandmother, and destroying the village, so she felt responsible for resolving the issues she caused. Seeing Sahyo crying over her mistake, Musashi tried to comfort her and finally allowed her to join in completing the mission to find and kill Iyamon. The next day, Musashi and his group continued their journey and were once again confronted by the Yoshioka sisters, who had brought new weapons. The three women appeared to be no match for Musashi, as he managed to defeat all three of them. After defeating the Yoshioka sisters, Musashi and the others continued walking until they reached a mine tunnel suspected to be the location where Iyamon was hiding and building his fortress. They explored the tunnel and arrived at a grand room with Western-style architecture and gold ornaments adorning the walls. At the same time, they were greeted by an old man named Alfred, who was Iyamon's right-hand man, and he stated that he had been awaiting the arrival of Musashi and the others at the Golden Castle. At that moment, Sahe and Heikuro were impressed by Iyamon, who had successfully built such a magnificent golden castle. Meanwhile, Sahyo felt that Iyamon had forced the villagers into forced labor to fulfill his dream of owning the golden castle. After that, Sahe asked Alfred to hand over the gold mine before they forcibly took it, as the mining area was within their clan's territory. Calmly, Alfred stated that Iyamon didn't want any violence to occur and even invited Sahe and the others to join. Hearing this, Sahyo seemed unconcerned with what Alfred was saying and demanded that he immediately free the villagers, including her parents. After that, Alfred informed her that her parents and all the villagers were still alive, showing her a place where all the villagers were engaged in gold mining activities. At that moment, Alfred explained that the place was not only Iyamon's residence, but also a heavily guarded and state-of-the-art laboratory that would be difficult for the shogunate forces, including Western military troops, to penetrate. The castle also reflected Iyamon's success in realizing his dream of having a magnificent residence combined with the power of the Genma. After that, Sahyo was curious about Iyamon's unseen forces, so Alfred informed her about Iyamon's Genma forces, which involved resurrecting the dead and turning them into powerful demons, like the Yoshioka brothers who once fought against Musashi. Nevertheless, Alfred believed that Musashi would be much stronger with the power of the Aoni gauntlet. Shortly after, Alfred led Musashi and the others to a grand hall where he once again offered them all to join Iyamon. At that moment, Sahe reiterated that he and the others would never join Iyamon and requested Alfred to summon Iyamon to meet with them immediately. Hearing this response, Alfred appeared shocked and deemed them all foolish. After that, Iyamon's henchmen began to threaten Musashi and the group that they would torture them all to death and resurrect them with the power of Genma. Without wasting time, Alfred unleashed his cavalry and attacked Musashi and the others using arrows and firearms. One arrow that aimed at Sadio was successfully intercepted by Musashi, although his hand was injured by the arrow. Alfred's attack overwhelmed everyone, especially as Musashi struggled to open the Oni gauntlet box. Therefore, Heikurobe decided to sacrifice himself to stop Alfred by using poisonous gas, immediately administering the antidote to Musashi and the others before releasing the poisonous gas towards Alfred. Sahe then explained to Musashi that Heikuro's poison powder was made from opium seeds capable of causing hallucinations to anyone who inhaled it. At that moment, Sahe admitted he was unsure if the poison would work against a Genma monster like Alfred, but he knew that Heikuro had another technique to enhance the poison's effects if the powder smoke came into contact with fresh human blood. This occurred when Heikuro pulled out the arrow aimed at him by Alfred, mixing his blood with the opium powder and causing Alfred to start hallucinating. With Alfred in a hallucination state, Musashi easily defeated Iyamon's henchmen, while Heikuro eventually succumbed after losing a lot of blood. Shortly after, they were surprised by the arrival of Sahyo's parents into the hall, prompting Sahyo to approach her parents. Unexpectedly, Sahyo's parents had been possessed by Genma, causing them to suddenly turn evil and choke her. In that moment, Sahyo's parents asked Musashi to kill them, but Sahyo opposed and made Musashi hesitate in making a decision. After some moments of contemplation, Musashi, unwilling to let Sahyo die, ultimately decided to kill Sahyo's parents. Musashi thought he dared to do so because the Oni had influenced him, even though he wasn't wearing the Oni gauntlet. The scene then showing to the past, where the boy Kensuke cared for had grown into a knowledgeable and skilled young man in the art of the sword. So Kensuke gave him the name Iyamon after the owner of the katana he found. One day, Kensuke asked if Iyamon was ready to become a samurai, but Iyamon apologized for not being able to fulfill his teacher's dream, because Iyamon's true goal was to kill all samurai who lived like the shogunate's pet dogs. That's why Iyamon wanted to find the strongest samurai by staging the Battle of Sekigahara, a war that once divided the samurai into two factions. After hearing Iyamon's explanation, unexpectedly, Kensuke became interested in his student's plan. In the present, Musashi rejected Iyamon's idea of carrying out the Battle of Sekigahara, which surprising Iyamon, because if Musashi agreed to join, he could use his sword skills to fight freely during the war. If Musashi died, Iyamon said he was willing to resurrect him using the power of Genma. Shortly after, Musashi was surprised by the arrival of Kojiro, who had actually died after fighting Musashi. It turns out, Iyamon had resurrected Kojiro and other warriors so he could create the strongest and unbeatable army. In his plan, Iyamon intended to destroy the Tokugawa government and then unite Japan, followed by the conquest of Asia and Europe. When Musashi and Kojiro faced each other, Iyamon gave them the choice to join him or be killed in a duel with Kojiro. Musashi then insisted on his choice not to join Iyamon, so Iyamon ordered Kojiro to attack Musashi. Unexpectedly, Kojiro instead severed Iyamon's arm and leg because he disliked being ordered by others. At the same time, the undead entered the room, prompting Musashi to direct Sahe to take Sadio and leave quickly. Musashi also apologized to Sadio for killing her parents and asked her to leave. Sahe then urged Sayo to leave, while Musashi put on the Oni gauntlet to face Kojiro. At that moment, Kojiro, who had been awaiting a duel with Musashi, revealed his demonic form just as the Genma monsters began to surround them. During the battle between Musashi and Kojiro, Iyamon, now powerless, remembered his past when he played a game against Sahe, who easily won the game. In front of all his fellow students, Iyamon admitted his defeat to Sahe, who was a brilliant war strategist. Nevertheless, Iyamon whispered to Sahe that he would win the next match. With his arms and legs severed, Iyamon appeared unwilling to surrender, so he tried to crawl into the room to transform himself into Genma so that his body could heal. While Musashi and Kojiro were fighting, they were disturbed by the increasing number of Genma, prompting Kojiro to use his techniques to destroy the Genma, even though it caused the bridge they were standing on to collapse, leading both samurai to fall into a lower room where Ieyamon's weapons of war were being produced. At that moment, Kojiro, who claimed to dislike war and was only interested in battling his rival, then released his monstrous form and prepared to duel Musashi again. On the other hand, Sahei and Sayo still hadn't found a way out and entered a room with traces of blood on the floor. Upon entering the room, they saw Iyamon dragging his body inside. At that time, Sahei was surprised by Iyamon's pitiful condition, while Iyamon tried to persuade Sahei to help him perform the Genma summoning ritual for his body. Iyamon then convinced Sahei to take his body to another room to conduct the Genma summoning ritual in exchange for positions and abundant wealth. Although Sayo kept reminding Sahei not to be tempted by Iyamon's offers, Sahei seemed interested in the various attractive things Iyamon promised to give him, so he finally took Iyamon's body to the adjacent room where the Genma summoning ritual would be performed. On the other hand, Musashi and Kojiro were still in battle, where Musashi admired Kojiro's Genma power and asked why Kojiro hadn't used that formidable power from the beginning of the duel. Feeling like he was part of the evil Oni and had killed Sayo's parents, Musashi then chose to confront Kojiro using the full power of the Oni, causing Musashi to lose control over himself. At the same time, Sahei had placed Iyamon's body on a table, but instead of helping, Sahei restrained Iyamon's face until he was powerless. At that moment, Sahei apologized for lying to Iyamon and explained that he had a secret task unknown to Kensuke and others. While giving Iyamon a poison pill, Sahei also explained that he was not interested in Iyamon's overly elaborate plan, because he chose to live in a world that was already peaceful without war, like the present one. Seeing Sahei's dark side, Sayo appeared frightened, while Sahei confessed that he had been ordered by the clan leader to kill everyone who knew about the gold mine, including Sahyo and Musashi. However, Sahei chose not to harm her or Musashi, because he had already killed Iyamon to take control of the mine. After that, Sahei said he would find the right excuse so that the clan leader wouldn't blame him. After telling Sayo about his true purpose in joining Musashi's travel group, Sahei then urged Sayo to leave the mining site immediately. Unfortunately, she refused, saying there was something she had to do. After that, Sahei left and praying for Sayo's success with her plan. Not long after, Sayo was seen heading to the location of the battle between Kojiro and Musashi, which was now completely controlled by the Oni. At that moment, Sayo ran towards the two dueling samurai, and luckily, she was not hit by any sword strikes aimed at her. After that, Sayo tried to awaken Musashi to return to his human consciousness and not be influenced by the whispers of the Oni demon trying to control the samurai. Musashi then asked Sayo to leave immediately as his battle with Kojiro was a fight between fellow demons that he had to settle. But Sayo insisted that the Musashi she knew was not a demon but a human being, and with unwavering determination, she continued to plead for Musashi to return to being human until finally, the Oni energy that initially possessed the samurai began to dissipate, returning Musashi to his human form. On the other hand, Kojiro was momentarily annoyed with his battle against Musashi, which had to be interrupted when Sayo suddenly arrived, causing Musashi to return to his human form. At that moment, Musashi confessed that he would not disappoint Kojiro, even though he would fight without the Oni gauntlet. He also promised to continue their fight while stepping forward and grabbing an oar to face Kojiro. Before the battle began, Musashi directed Sayo to immediately leave through the corridor, guided by Toromaru. Although saddened by having to part with Musashi, Sayo reluctantly followed his orders while still hoping that Musashi would remain the man she knew. On the other hand, Sahei appeared to still be walking through the corridor towards the exit of the mining site. At that moment, he remembered Musashi's words about 3 traitors in the group, and Sahei couldn't believe that Musashi had realized that the last traitor in the group was Sahei. At the same time, the mining site began to collapse, and Musashi was still engaged in a fierce battle with Kojiro. Turning to Sayo, after traveling quite a distance, she arrived in the city and went to an inn to book the best room available. The innkeeper initially doubted Sayo's dirty appearance, but after Sayo gave him a gold nugget, the owner of the inn warmly welcomed the girl in front of him, even allowing Sayo to stay with her family. At that moment, the innkeeper's son appeared confused as to why his mother allowed Sayo to stay in their inn, and the owner said she felt sorry for Sayo, who seemed to have gone through many bitter experiences outside, and besides, she felt that by accepting Sayo, she wouldn't be lonely while taking care of the inn. In the end of the film, It shows Unso finding the Oni gauntlet in front of the temple. Unfortunately, he did not see any signs of Kaizen's return, so Unso suspected that his disciple had fallen in his mission with Musashi. When Unso took the Oni gauntlet, he felt the object getting heavier as if many Genma souls had been absorbed into it. Moral lesson from the story: when fighting demons and samurai, always carry a spare ore and a gold nugget. You never know when they'll come in handy, especially if you end up in an inn with a suspicious innkeeper.